In 2016, Chris Metzen stepped away from Blizzard to spend time with family, deal with some important personal care, and open up his own tabletop business. He was the story and lore lead on every Warcraft title dating back to the original RTS in the early 90s. He ended up being moved all the way up to a senior VP role in the company before his departure. Announced as of last week, this being recorded October 1st, 2023, he's rejoined Blizzard to once again helm the lore and story department. There's also rumors swirling around his involvement in a possible WoW Classic expansion. Let's dive into these details together. This will be a more informal episode. While I normally fully script every word I say in episodes of Ancient Lore, instead I'll be going off bullet points and a few notes I have. In addition, this will be one of the few times I feel I need to present credentials for the thoughts and criticisms I'll be presenting here. Personally, I've been speaking on Warcraft lore and story officially since mid-2005 when Ancient of Lore first premiered on WoW Radio. I was the first to dive into a deep and meaningful understanding of Warcraft's story, and I take it very seriously. I also have had my criticisms of Metzen in the past, but I also respect who he is, the good he's done, and the challenges he's overcome. With that being said, let's actually get into it here. I want to start by saying I do very much respect the positive vibes around Metzen's return. A lot of people have a very good, positive energy around him coming back and hopefully bringing some of what made old lore and story for Warcraft amazing. I have my own feelings on that, and I'm going to get to that in a second. But I just want to say before I get into where I'm at with it, I want people to be excited and happy for this. I'm not here to be a naysayer in any way. If things turn out incredibly well, I'm going to be the first to stand up and say, yes, this is great. I love this. I'm so happy that this actually turned out well. I want things to work out well. I want things to work out better than they did post TBC, really, even post vanilla. Is that going to happen? Am I going to get that wish? Probably not. And this is kind of where I start to question if that energy, if that positive vibe of Metzen coming back is the right call. Well, not the right call per se, but well placed, we'll say. And I'm not convinced of that. And here's kind of the background to that choice. Again, I've been talking about this since 2005. I've dug up so much nonsense and gone into so much detail that I sometimes I am so excessively jaded that I have to ask, am I wrong about this? But in this case, let's actually get into a couple specifics. Metzen has forgotten what he has written before. Now, anyone who's written anything has done that. Absolutely has done that. I have done that with scripts. I have done that with my own personal writings. I have done that with trying to organize my own files. And I have simply forgotten stuff. It happens. We have to be understanding of that. However, he forgot some big stuff. For example, the Draenei. There was this wonderful opening to what the Draenei were and who the Draenei were in Warcraft 3, and to a certain extent in WoW Vanilla. We do see some of the Forgotten Ones and some other Draenei wanderers that came through the portal in Blasted Lands and Swamp of Sorrows. There's actually a large amount of quests for them. Chris Metzen forgot about that. Like, I'm not even joking. He just forgot about that. He forgot about everything from Warcraft 3, everything from those mobs that were in game. And when he made the Draenei, he had to try to amend what he'd written with what was already in the world. That sounds extreme. but he just forgot. Again, it happens, but this is excessive. This is what... This was the first time I really had a problem with something. And he never really amended it, to be honest. He just said, hey, here's Draenei as they are now. Have another pretty race alliance. And most people were fine with it and liked it. For me, it was incredibly depressing because I knew what we already had with the Draenei, with what we saw in Warcraft 3, with what we saw in Akama. The tip of that iceberg was something that was absolutely tantalizing for those of us who actually studied what was in Warcraft 3. And then to see some of them popping up in vanilla. Okay, curious, when we do go to Outland, what's going to be there? And then we get the announcement for Draenei, and it was, for me, it was incredibly disheartening. And then to hear the reasons behind it, I had to step away. I had to take a break for a while from all of this. Because the person who I assumed was doing everything to the best of his abilities, maybe he was, but he had just forgotten it. And then when he wrote the new stuff, he's like, fuck it. That was a lot for me to deal with. Another thing that he just forgot was actually something from Warcraft 3 as well, with the Kaldorei, the Night Elves. He had forgotten that only males could be druids, and only women could be priests. It's not really well documented, but the game shows that there's only male druids. And maybe you could also chalk that up to the restriction of models in-game. Understandable, whatever. But as we understood from the writing from Warcraft 3, all the males were druids and went to sleep, while all the women stayed awake, managed the land, managed Mount Hyjal, managed the priesthood. Sentinels were women, priests were women, druids were male. Just forgot about that. And while in most situations, I'm going to be like, gender divides are dumb, we shouldn't do them in the first place. In this situation, I did hold it just a little accountable on that. And what they did actually in Cataclysm with archaeology was they put in a set of idols in-game that retconned when women could be druids and men could be priests, sentinels. Which I thought was hilarious, because I remembered back from during vanilla, like 2005, 2006, where I complained, wait a second, there are these certain gender divides in society here. Why aren't they being recognized in the MMO? Because in vanilla, there were no gender restrictions at all. Which again, I'm fine with. But it's more like, why did you just skip to this instead of explaining it then and now? And the reason was Metzen forgot, which is the purpose of this actual discussion. He did forget about these things. In addition, Metzen has a history of tunnel visioning, big time on certain things. He has his favorite characters, as we all do. We all have the characters and the people that we're like, oh, I want this. With Metzen, it was Thrall, Garrosh, and Sylvanas. Big time. And while, again, there's nothing wrong with that, this was many times to the detriment of other factions and leaders. So, just again for a few examples, Cairn Bloodhoof. There was so much that could have been done, not just with the Tauren in general and their history with Kalimdor, because they had been roaming the plains of Kalimdor for ages and ages and ages, since the Centaur kicked them out of Mulgore. That was a very long time. Cairn is also very, very old. And the fact that we didn't get any real stories from him, we didn't really get any quests from him until he was used as a punching bag for Garrosh. That was incredibly disappointing. Tyrande, also going back to Night Elves. Tyrande, barely used. Barely a part of any stories until we really get into Legion and BFA. Which is, again, incredibly unfortunate because between her and Thrall, not Thrall, but Cairn and the Tauren and the Night Elves, those were the two dominant races on Kalimdor, at least sentient-wise, that we interact with on a regular basis. Obviously, there were centaurs. There were a few others, but those were kind of the big ones. So why didn't we get any stories involving those two factions and maybe those two leaders in particular together? Because not Sylvanas, but Tyrande had to be the one to lead her people while the Druids were sleeping. Like, she was the one. So why didn't we get any of that? And that's a question I asked big time. Another example, and I'm not gonna say because I want you all to think about this. Gnomeregan was a launch instance. It launched in 2004. How long did it take them to retake Gnomeregan? I'll wait. I'm not actually going to wait. I'm just going to have you all look it up on your own. How long did it take them to retake Gnomeregan? How long were we going in there when all these other things were happening and changing the world? The cataclysm occurs. The world goes through so many changes and evolutions, and yet it took how long for Gnomeregan to see any progress? Another example, going back to the Draenei, they were brought in during TBC, and then until Legion, they were just kind of ignored afterwards. The Prophet, the Naru, all these things and elements that they had brought in with TBC, with the Draenei, were just ignored. They were brought in, yay, they're here, and then they're set aside. Barely anything happened with them. It is unfortunate that you're going to bring in a major new faction and create this whole new dynamic of traveling through space, effing space, and then you're never gonna do anything with it until Legion happens. That was a mistake. That was a mistake, in my opinion. Now, I do want to recognize I have a bias in this big time, if it's not already obvious. I have always been at least vocally critical of Metzen for a very long time. And it only got worse with each expansion. By the time Wrath was hitting, and we didn't get a Jal Narub, I was actively upset with him, amongst other people. Obviously, it wasn't only his fault, but you get the idea. Cataclysm made it worse. Pandaria made it a lot worse. And it didn't really get any better. I've always been very critical of Chris Metzen. And I want to make sure that bias is presented here. I'm very biased. I want people to be aware of that. So all of my thoughts and complaining needs to be taken with a grain of salt. I am biased against him. That's okay. I'm presenting this with that bias, but I also want to make sure you all are aware of that. The other thing I'm going to say is I do specifically have issues with the retcons he has tried to band-aid on the world over and over and over again. There are quite a few people in the lore and story community that are okay with that kind of behavior. I think we deserve better. I do think we deserve better. And again, nothing against a lot of the other people who talk about lore and story in Warcraft, but I will say, allowing the behavior to continue without criticism, I think is a mistake. If I'm the one that has to be doing that, that's fine, but I do need to say, we need to hold ourselves to a higher standard, while still respecting everyone involved and making sure we respect boundaries and not like attacking people directly, but making sure we're holding everyone to a higher standard and applying reasonable criticism. I will also say, I do respect the hell out of Metzen. He has been the one from the beginning to create all of this. We wouldn't have any of this without him. Like, nothing. We would not have any of this. We'd still have Warhammer, and that's it. None of this would have ever occurred. So, I respect the absolute hell out of Chris Metzen. He has also, and I mentioned this briefly earlier, he's dealt with a lot of personal issues. And he's dealt with them positively. In a healthy way. In a reasonable way. He's done such a good job for himself that I think that must be mentioned. He talked about this when he did an interview after he stepped away from Blizzard. And I think it goes into some really important detail about it. I would encourage everyone to take a listen to it if you can find it still. He dealt with them in a healthy way. He also, in 2018, had to deal with spinal surgery. I don't talk about my personal life too much, but back when I was younger, my dad had to deal with spinal and neck surgery. It is frightening. It is frightening because a tiny mistake can cause an immense amount of permanent damage. It is not it is not something that you can just walk through. You have to make every single correct step, both in preparation, in making sure you're choosing the right doctors, in making sure you're making the right choices for the right procedure. I believe the 2018 surgery might have been in regards to a motorcycle accident, but I'm not 100% on that. Don't quote me on that. But he got through it, and he did an incredible job of recovery, and got right back into health. He also opened up his own tabletop business, which not only is that a lot of fun, but it's great to see him having other activities. He has also been one of the most consistently positive presences, not just in Blizzard, because Blizzard has obviously had so many people who have been abusers, who have been anti-union, who have harmed employees in general. And from my understanding, he has been a voice for good and positive energy, of making sure people can do their job, can create these wonderful works, and celebrate it. And not just in Blizzard, but in the gaming industry in general. His fascination for tabletop and the amount of positive energy he's put into that industry has been exceptional as well, and deserves an immense amount of respect and credit for that. And to kind of close out this part of the discussion, if anyone is going to do this job and do it correctly, it's probably going to be Chris Metzen. That is, if he can stay organized and if he can stay focused. The stories that he made with the original Warcraft RTSs and the world that he built through those is something that we all love and enjoy. Otherwise, none of us would be here. You wouldn't be listening to this video. He is, if he can stay organized and focused and really build the world out like he's done in the past, he is the most qualified to lead the Warcraft story team once again. Now, this kind of leads into the rumor for Classic Plus or as it's being called, Awakening. World of Warcraft Awakening. The first actual expansion for WoW Classic. Again, this is a rumor. This is a rumor. This is coming from Reddit, so take that with a grain of salt. We'll see how accurate it is. However, the concept is a what-if scenario. So, what if the Dark Portal did not open? So this isn't an expansion on Classic Wrath or Classic TBC. We're going back to the baseline Classic here with this. The price point is going to be $50 US. And the rumor is Metzen is going to be the lead on the project. They're going to be using a lot of assets from TBC, Wrath, and Cataclysm. Level cap will be 70. No new continents. No new continents. Again, this is coming directly from Reddit. I'm kind of reading verbatim from the Reddit post. But Highjaw and the Emerald Dream will be new zones. They want to finish vanilla quest lines that were lost to the arrival of Burning Crusade, which I actually just talked about in a previous Ancient Lore episode. High Elves and Ogres will be the new races. And the first raid tier will be against the Scourge. This post also includes that Classic Cataclysm will happen after Wrath. And all of this is supposed to be announced at BlizzCon this year. So we'll see how accurate all of this is, and soon, in about a month or so. My thoughts on this. A lot of people have been asking for this. A lot. There's a reason that Turtle WoW is putting in Highjaw here in a few days. There's a reason they're putting in Gilneas. People want to see the world finished. To be clear, no expansion has ever completed the entire world. Like with Northrend, with all the different islands, with all the different unfinished continents. No one has ever done a complete job on the world. Not even a private server, with all the efforts that groups like Turtle and Epoch and Everlook have done. This would be a small but very important step in what many would consider to be the right direction. Ogres would make absolute sense for the Horde. High Elves make absolute sense for the Alliance. In fact, many people would say High Elves should have been an Alliance race from the start. And this whole Blood Elf thing, maybe there should have been a divide instead of everyone going Blood Elf. There's an argument to be made there. I'm not saying it's right, but there's an argument to be made there. This feels... I'm not going to say I don't hate it, but... yeah, I don't hate it. I'm interested to see what actually happens. Am I going to pay for it? I doubt it. That's going to be a big we'll see, because $50 for 2 new zones and 1 new raid at least to start and a couple new races, I'm not sure how I feel about that. The price point feels way too high, but also that's very in line with Blizzard nowadays. That's very in line. That's 100% in line with Diablo pricing and what we've seen. So that makes sense. But otherwise, I don't know. I like this idea a lot. I like the idea of completing the world. I like the idea of completing the world. But if this doesn't go to address Gilneas, doesn't go to address the fact that Kul Tiras isn't accessible in vanilla, isn't a tiny island nation that lived by its wits and its mercantile nature, this is a tiny step in the right direction if true, but we need to see the other steps. we need to see Uldum. We need to see the rest of the world. I want to see more about this. I'm intrigued enough that I'm definitely going to be paying attention, but that's kind of where I am on this. And again, if anyone's going to lead it, Chris Metzen is going to be the one to actually lead it. I just want him to stay focused, to do it right. But if anyone's going to do it, it's going to be him. So I wish the best. Again, I'm not trying to be a downer or be negative excessively in any way. But I do want to make sure we're realistic about what we're getting into. I want to see success, and I want to understand, if we don't see success, why we didn't see it. So, again, whether you agree or disagree with me, feel free to comment. I don't mind. The comment section on my YouTube page, it's great discussion. I love you all, and I'm so grateful for the discussions we can have in the comments. So feel free to reply. But that's my thoughts here. If you've enjoyed this discussion piece, please consider subscribing here at youtube.com/TheDanNation, as well as joining my Discord at tinyurl.com/Danscord. It's a Discord, but with 100% more Dan. A big thank you to Turtle Wow, where some of the visual footage, as well as the music and backing track for this piece, was provided by. An additional thank you to those of you who have signed up for memberships here on YouTube. Your financial support is greatly appreciated. From the Lore Bunker in Boston, Massachusetts, this is Dan saying good night and good luck.